The highway was a river of black ice and brake lights, the kind of winter night that hid danger in plain sight. Daniel Carter didn't believe in miracles. He believed in torque ratios, split-second judgment, and the way his daughter's small hand could pull him back from the edge of any storm. When the SUV ahead fishtailed and slammed the guardrail, flames stitched themselves along the hood like a row of hungry mouths. Daniel had already pulled to the shoulder before the explosion of glass reached the night. He told Emily to stay put, to lock the doors, to count to 100 if the sirens were late. Then he ran. Smoke curled into the snowflakes and turned them black. A woman's face flickered in the ruined cabin framed in blood, stubborn, terrified, refusing to surrender. He didn't know her name, her world, her worth. He only knew that in this singular moment, she was his to save. The wreck smoldered as the wind threaded the smell of hot metal through Daniel's jacket. He yanked on the driver's door. It refused, buckled at the frame. He vaulted over the hood, took one breath that tasted like copper and ash, then smashed the passenger's side with the heel of his boot. The window spidered. Again, the glass surrendered. He reached inside, fingers cutting, palm slick with gasoline and snowmelt, and found her shoulder a fine-boned hinge under a wool coat, tense as piano wire. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady, because steadiness saves lives. "I'm getting you out." Her eyes flashed green beneath soot, lucid in a way that told him she was fighting. The pain, the smoke, herself. "It won't open," she coughed. "It will," he said, and lied with purpose. He wedged his arm through the mess of glass and pried at the jammed handle until something tore in his elbow and the door groaned. Heat rolled out. He slid his other arm beneath her knees and lifted. She wasn't light. She carried the weight of someone who had spent years resisting gravity and was finally forced to admit it existed. They stumbled back into the whirling snow. Flames licked the dash as he carried her down the embankment, boots punching through crusted drifts. On the shoulder above, his old pickup sat with its hazard lights blinking like patient eyes. Inside, Emily watched small, pale, hands flat to the window, and Daniel caught her gaze long enough to say without words, "I'm okay. We're okay." He laid the woman on a blanket beside the plow-scarred guardrail. "Can you hear me?" She nodded once. The nod dissolved into coughing. "Seatbelt, cut into my ribs." "Better bruised than burned," he said softly. He unbuttoned his jacket, tucked it under her neck as a wedge, and checked her pupils, the bleed at her scalp, the angle of her left leg. He had a paramedic's memory wired into a mechanic's hands. Volunteer shifts at the firehouse had trained the instinct he already possessed. Watch carefully. Move decisively. Keep the person in front of you at the center of the world until the sirens take over. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Olivia." "Olivia," he repeated, sealing it into the night. "I'm Daniel. It's going to hurt to breathe for a bit. Stay with me." Her gaze slid to the truck, to the child's face behind the fogging glass. "Your daughter?" "Emily," he said, and smiled to show that the word could be said in the middle of tragedy and still mean light. The sirens came late, as mountain sirens do. By then, the SUV was a bonfire, and snow hissed into steam when it kissed the heat. Two troopers skidded to a stop. The volunteer engine from Ridgecrest arrived with its mismatched doors and its stubborn pride. They strapped Olivia to a board and lifted her into the ambulance. Her hand caught Daniel's sleeve as the doors began to swing shut. "You," she said, voice ragged but precise, "you saved my life." He had heard gratitude dozens of times, in dozens of shapes. Sometimes it was loud. Sometimes it was strangled by shock. This one sounded like a ledger entry finally balanced. "Drive safe next time," he said, and let the doors close on both of them. Her to the hospital, him back to the cab where Emily's breath had made small stars on the glass. Ridgecrest was a town that pretended to be invisible and succeeded so completely that people forgot they had driven through it. On the map, it was a left-hand margin of Colorado, thin as a thumbnail slice of white. On the ground, it was brick storefronts whose paint remembered better days, a diner that served pie unironically, and the garage where Daniel worked 6 days a week fixing the kinds of problems people could afford to fix. In the morning, the sky turned a blue so brittle it felt like it might shatter if you looked at it too hard. Daniel took Emily to school, dropped her at the curb where the teacher's aide waved in her knitted hat, and went to the shop. The smell of oil and rubber dissolved into him the way morning coffee dissolves into a habit. He didn't tell anyone about the rescue. The firehouse knew. It would go into the run logs, reduced to a timestamp and a license plate number. But at the garage, nobody asked about the slice on his palm or the ash stain in the fabric of his jacket. The men there already knew his economy of words. They accepted it, the way small towns accept certain winters and grudges. By noon, The roads were clear like nothing had happened at all. It was 3 days before Olivia Bennet walked into Ridgecrest. Her town car stopped in front of the garage, sleek, black, a note held too long in a symphony that did not include this place. She stepped out in a coat the color of stormwater and a scarf that knew how to be expensive without speaking it aloud. She was thinner than the ambulance boards made her. The coat couldn't hide the square of the bandage at her hairline or the collarbone bruising that spilled ink blue beneath her blouse. 2 men hovered at her sides in quiet suits that said, "You don't need to see our hands." Daniel didn't notice her at first, because he was under a Tacoma with a rusted exhaust. He slid out on the creeper when a voice, not the suits, not local, said, "Mr. Carter?" He blinked at the sudden winter light. Emily's hair clip lay by his socket set dropped there this morning while she hummed to herself and watched him coil an air hose. He reached for it and closed his hand around the plastic butterfly before he stood. "Can I help you?" Olivia looked both out of place and precisely placed. The way a chess piece looks when it finally arrives on the square it had been aiming at for half the game. "I didn't think thank you would be enough," she said, and the vowels were Manhattan but the tone was deliberate plainness. "So I decided not to start with those words." He said nothing. The mechanic's manners. Wait until the client tells you what the noise is. Then find out what it really island. "I'm Olivia Bennet." It didn't sound like an introduction so much as a fact that had paid rent in every room it ever entered. She seemed almost tired of having to say it, which stirred something like sympathy in him he didn't want. "The woman from the crash." "I remember," he said. "You pulled me out," she said, as if reminding herself how, exactly, she was still breathing. "I did what anyone would. I'm surrounded by a lot of anyones, Mr. Carter. Not many of them would run toward fire." He shrugged. The shrug meant, "I've run toward worse. One of my assistants found you," she continued. "It wasn't hard. Ridgecrest keeps excellent records. And you volunteer twice a month. The firehouse speaks highly of you. So does most of Main Street, as it turns out. And your suits?" Daniel's eyes flicked to the men flanking her. "Security," she said lightly. "I don't usually need them in Colorado. But after you crawl out of an inferno, people get nervous on your behalf." "What do you want, Miss Bennet?" The businessman's version of a smile touched her mouth, a quick calculation before a check clears. "To return the favor. Or, if I'm honest, to overpay it." "No need," he said, and meant it. She took a breath the way people take a step onto ice they hope will hold. "I own Bennett and Keene." "Sounds like a law firm." "It's a portfolio company. We buy, we fix, we sell. Mostly tech. Sometimes logistics. Occasionally, a legacy brand with sentiment baked in." The way she spoke of the companies made them sound like engines she could take apart blindfolded. "You have skills. I could use someone like you on a logistics rebuild we're doing in Denver. 20% pay bump to start. Full medical for you and your daughter. Relocation covered. She has a school here," Daniel said. "Friends." Olivia looked at the snow-bright sky as if trying to memorize a color she never feared forgetting. "She can have the same in Denver." "You can't buy continuity," he said. "It's built with small days." That drew her eyes back to him. "You talk like a man who has read grief closely." "I've had a few subscriptions," Daniel said. A flicker, then, "Me too." It hung between them, the mutual recognition that whatever palaces they visited, they had both slept in the basement once. "I'm not looking for a new life, Miss Bennet," Daniel said. "I'm trying to keep the old one intact. Perhaps I could help with that." "You're here," he said, "and that already makes it more complicated." The suits tensed almost invisibly as if to defend their CEO from the bluntness. But Olivia didn't flinch. Instead, she let the quiet stretch, a negotiator's quiet, and then she shifted tactics. "Dinner," she offered. "No contracts, no pitches, just a chance to say the words I chose not to lead with." He could have said no. He had practiced that word so often it lived under his tongue like a coin. But Emily would ask, and he found himself curious about the way this woman held herself in a world where everything tried to pry it loose. "Fine," he said. "Diner on Main, 7. He watched her leave, the black car moving through Ridgecrest like a piano rolled through a barn dance. He slid back beneath the Tacoma and listened to the thread of his life, pull taut and hum. They took the corner booth. The waitress called Daniel honey and called Olivia ma'am, then returned with coffee that steamed and pie that dared you to resist it. Olivia declined the pie. The bruise under her jaw was turning golden at the edges. Thank you, she finally said, and when she said it, the syllables were plain, almost rough. For going into that car. 4. Not letting me be a headline stuck between ads for things no one needs. You're welcome. I thought that would land differently, she admitted with a ghost of a smile. It usually does. I'm not most rooms, he said. No, she agreed, you're not. They spoke the way two people speak when both are used to commanding the conversation, and both decide not to. She asked about Emily what she liked to read, whether she still believed in Santa. He asked about New York, not the skyline, but the way the city sounded at 4 in the morning. They traded small truths that revealed larger ones by accident. At one point, Olivia reached for her water and winced. Ribs, she said apologetically. Everything my car didn't manage, the EMTs did. Daniel's mouth tilted. Better bruised than burned. That's what you said, she remembered. It's also a decent motto for mergers. He laughed before he could stop himself. She registered the sound like a deposit she hadn't expected. The suits at the counter kept their distance. People in Ridgecrest minded their business unless invited. At the end of the meal, Olivia opened her bag and took out a slim envelope. She slid it across. He didn't touch it. What is it? A check. A gift to the Ridgecrest Firehouse. In your name. Equipment upgrades. Training. The works. Daniel didn't move for a long second. Then he slid the envelope back. Make it anonymous. May I ask why? She said carefully, as if they were nearing a fault line. Because it's not about me, he said, and the it expanded to include more than the money. She understood. All right, she said. Anonymous then. She tucked the envelope away. What about you? Is there anything you need? Yes, he said. For you to leave this town the way you found it. She searched his face. I'll be gone tomorrow. You'll leave footprints, he said. I always do, she said without pride. They stepped out into the brittle cold. Daniel zipped his jacket to his throat. Olivia breathed carefully, as if the air might have edges. Good night, Mr. Carter. Good night, Miss Bennet. She stood there a moment longer than necessary. He let her. The thing about high-profile names is that they travel faster than their bodies. By the weekend, Ridgecrest knew the woman in the crash had been important in a way newspapers liked. The whispers collected like frost along the margins of people's routines. Some said the CEO had offered Daniel a job. Some said she had offered him more than that. No one asked Daniel. Ridgecrest had been raised not to. On Sunday, after church, Daniel took Emily to the hill behind the middle school to sled. Her laughter rang off the hard sky and chipped a few safe pieces off the edge of his caution. At the bottom of the hill, she lay on her back, snow angeling, and said, Daddy, do you think the lady you saved has a daughter? I don't know, he said. She looked like she needed one. He tucked that somewhere he couldn't see it, and hoped it would stop aching on its own. Olivia was gone Monday morning. Her car left the impression of a black bullet through white scenery and then no impression at all. Daniel thought maybe that was the end. The night folded into the rest of his days like a dark thread, strong, invisible if you didn't tilt it toward the light. But power is an orbit. 10 days later, Ridgecrest found itself in the path of another trajectory. It began with a truck that shouldn't have been on Deer Run in winter. Denver plates, boxy, white. The kind of logistics vehicle that whispers just in time and shouts corner cutting. Daniel saw it while he was closing the shop early. The forecast had promised a blow, and the town took forecasts seriously after a certain storm stole 3 roofs and a dog. The truck fishtailed as it took the curve by the old mill, then corrected too hard. The back axle clipped the guardrail and spun. A second later, it was on its side, blocking both lanes, disgorging crates, like broken promises. Daniel swore, grabbed his extinguisher, and ran. He was halfway there when another car, a slate-colored sedan, slid out of nowhere and skidded toward the jackknife truck. He had the sense that the world was repeating itself with a different script and the same moral. The sedan missed the worst of the wreck, crunched into a snowbank, and stalled. The driver pushed the door open, stood, and pulled off a pair of too thin gloves. Olivia Bennet had come back to Colorado. She looked at the truck the way you look at a problem you'd pay good money to make someone else's. Then she looked at Daniel, and something that wasn't relief and wasn't dread crossed her face. Do you just haunt winter accidents? She asked, breath fogging. Maybe winter haunts me, he said, and pointed. Stay behind the rail. He went to the truck, kicked the windshield out, and helped the dazed driver crawl through. No fire this time, thank God. No fuel spilled a grace. Snow fell off the trees in sudden sighs. The storm not yet begun had sent scouts. Load secure, Daniel shouted over the wind. The driver, a kid with a nose ring and a license he probably still appreciated, nodded. Yeah, it's proprietary hardware for a warehouse outside Denver. We were rerouted. Whose? Daniel asked, though he already knew. Bennett and Keene, the kid said, wincing and clutching his wrist. Daniel looked back at Olivia. She had the dignity to look annoyed by the universe's sense of humor. This road isn't rated for box trucks in weather, Daniel said. Who rerouted you? The kid swallowed. Dispatch. Said it would shave an hour. Olivia closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with fresh iron. That's not our directive. Someone cut the safety protocol. Someone or something, Daniel said. Algorithms make cowards brave. She exhaled. A plan flickered behind her gaze like a switch being flipped. I'll handle it. You'll need help. He heard himself offering and wanted to bite the offer back. Get your driver in my truck. There's a clinic. I'll call for the tow, the plow, and the sheriff. I can pay for. He held up a hand. Don't turn everything into a receipt, Miss Bennett. She inclined her head, chastened without offense. Noted. The storm arrived in one slab. Snow came down with purpose. Daniel got the road half cleared before the county plow appeared, shaking its head at all the ways men try to outpace weather. By dusk, the truck was upright, chained, and creeping toward Denver under escort. Olivia stood beside Daniel while the taillights faded. I didn't come back for this, she said quietly. Why did you? I wanted to see where you live when I'm not interrupting it. His mouth tilted. This is it. Weather. Work. The kind of pie that fixes the day. And your daughter, she said. And my daughter. They stood in the muffled sound of falling snow. He felt a strange calm. Maybe calamity had given them a grammar they both spoke. Come to dinner, he heard himself say, reckless and careful at the same time. At my place. Olivia looked startled, which looked good on her. I don't do well in other people's homes, she confessed. They're intimate in ways I can't negotiate. Mine's humble enough, he said. It won't make demands. She considered, then nodded. All right. Emily adored her immediately for the simple reason that Olivia listened fully when Emily spoke. Most adults smiled at Emily as if she were a charming radio station you could turn down when you needed to take a call. Olivia tuned in. She asked about the book with the dragon that ate the moon, and whether gym class still did the parachute, and if the class hamster had ever learned to behave. Daniel watched the room make space around the three of them, and felt something flutter loose under his ribs, an old fear yawning, a new hope stretching its legs. Dinner was stew that had mostly obeyed the recipe and cornbread that had wholly betrayed it. Olivia complimented both with the skill of someone who had eaten food more expensive and less nourishing. When Emily was in bed, teeth brushed, book tucked, a last whispered question. Do you think Miss Olivia wears high heels to the grocery store? 9. Lights out. Daniel poured tea because that was what the house offered. Olivia sat on the worn sofa as if it were a throne and a safety net, both. You lost your wife, she said gently, not as a question, as a noticing. 3 years ago, he said. Leukemia, fast. Emily was 5. I'm sorry, she said. And the words held that rare weight of people who understand apologies aren't currency but companionship. What about you? He asked. Any footprints you walked away from? A fiancé, she said, not flinching. He wanted me to be a person who wore a life like a bracelet, pretty, visible, easy to remove. I wanted a life that fit like a spine. Did you love him? I loved the idea of not explaining myself, she said. Turns out that's not love. They were quiet. The house ticked in the cold. Outside, the storm assembled its choir. Miss Bennett, he said finally. Olivia, she corrected. Olivia, he amended, and the name was a bridge he wasn't sure he should cross. You offered me a job. I can offer you a life, she said, and the honesty of it didn't sound like arrogance so much as an affidavit. Better pay. Stability. A school where Emily will be fluent in 3 languages by the time she's 12. And what would it cost? Maybe nothing, she said. Everything costs something. She considered. It might cost you the quiet. He smiled without showing teeth. The quiet is where I hear my daughter laugh. She looked down, then up. Then I'm offering something else, she said. Friendship that doesn't require signatures. A line you can call that will be answered. Those aren't things you buy. Good. she said softly. Because I'm trying to learn how to give without a ledger. He nodded once. We could try that. They did. For a while. News moves in waves. After the Deer Run incident, someone in Denver decided the CEO who almost burned to death and then almost got trapped behind her own company's reckless routing made a good story. A blog ran it. Then a paper. Then the paper with the logo that made PR teams wake early. They printed a photo of Olivia standing by a snow-stunned truck and, in the background, a man whose profile belonged to the idea of a stoic. The caption did not name him, but the article did because Ridgecrest, for all its discretion, also had teenagers with phones. By Friday, reporters were calling the firehouse, the garage, the diner. A woman in a red coat ambushed Daniel in the grocery store and asked if he felt like a hero. He felt like a man trying to buy milk. He told Olivia that night on the phone. It's on me, she said immediately. I'll kill the story. You'll feed it if you try, he said. I can make it less hungry. You can't stop it from looking at Emily. Silence. When she spoke, her voice had that uncommon tremor of someone who knew she could move the world and hated the moments she failed to. I didn't think it would touch her. It touches everything you touch, he said gently. That's your power, and your curse. He heard her exhale. Then I'm poison. No, he said. You're a force. Forces need directing. To what end? To leave space around the small days. Daniel, she said, and it was the first time she had used his name like a plea. Tell me what to do. Leave it alone, he said. Let it burn through its oxygen. Don't feed it. And us? She asked, naked in the question. He looked at Emily asleep with her arm wrapped around a stuffed fox too threadbare to be anything but real. Us, he said slowly, has to be smaller than the story for a while. That sounds like goodbye. It might be the opposite, he said. It might be how we keep anything worth saying hello to. He could feel her considering it with the same rigor she applied to term sheets. All right. Thank you, he said, and meant it in a dozen languages neither of them spoke. Weeks learned to be quiet again. The news cycle tilted toward shinier tragedies. The world resumed its appetite. Daniel and Olivia spoke rarely but with care. When they did meet in Ridgecrest, at a trailhead with a hard sky and a thermos of coffee. In Denver, once, in a park where no one recognized a CEO without her armor, they touched each other's lives lightly. The way you touch a painting you suspect is still wet. Then came the call. It was late. And the mountains were the shape of sleeping animals against the darker dark. Daniel had just set his book down when his phone buzzed with a number he already knew. Daniel, Olivia said, voice level in that way that warns of a cliff. I need to ask you something impossible. Go on. There's a threat, she said. Not corporate, personal. Someone I fired last year. He's been making noise, mostly hot air, the kind you ignore because you can't afford to live afraid. Tonight that noise got a shape, a break-in at my apartment. Nothing taken, just disturbed. I've called the police. Security's here, but, she stopped. But you're alone, he said. Yes. I can be there in 2 hours, he said, already moving. No, she said quickly. I'm not asking you to come to the city. I'm asking you to take Emily and stay somewhere safe. If this is about you rescuing me, if the press made you a player in someone's narrative. Olivia, he said, listen to me. You are safe tonight. You have a team, and you know how to wield it. I am safe. Emily is safe. But I will do what you're really asking. And what is that? She whispered. I'll choose caution over pride, he said. We'll go stay at the firehouse for the night. Emily will love the trucks. She laughed once, the sound too thin. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, he said. Be careful. I can do careful, she said. I know, he said. He hung up. He gathered Emily and the fox in a bag with the essentials he defined differently than other men might. Insurance cards. A photo, the worn paperback she asked him to read when the world felt too big, the small box of letters his wife had written him from a hospital bed she refused to let dominate the room. They drove through a night that looked too quiet to be dangerous and slept on cots under a ceiling that smelled like old smoke and older stories. In the morning, a text from Olivia. It's handled. Thank you for listening. Always, he wrote. He stared at the word. It was too large. He didn't delete it. Spring, when it came late as if it, too, had tried to negotiate with winter and lost. The mountains finally unbent their shoulders. Ridgecrest thawed in patches, like a heart reluctant to believe good news. The check to the firehouse arrived with no name. Daniel knew its source. The upgrades began. A new jaws of life that purred like a big cat, turnout gear that didn't feel like wearing a wet rug, radios that could speak through any storm. The captain said a silent thank you no one heard. Olivia's company announced a logistics overhaul that built human judgment back into the algorithmic loop. The press called it quaint, then called it visionary when a rival's fully automated warehouse mistook a sun glare for a fire and wasted a week dumping foam on perfectly healthy inventory. Olivia smiled in a way that suggested she was collecting a debt from entropy. They saw each other less than either wanted. They were both, in their own ways, addicted to the discipline of restraint. It made the moments they did have precise. A coffee in a town no one monitored. A walk by the river where Emily collected flat stones, and Olivia pretended not to be charmed by a child who once asked if she ever took her crown off. And then came the moment the title of their story promised. Olivia stood in Daniel's garage on a day so clean it felt new. She looked tired in the bones the way only triumph creates. She had flown in from a boardroom that had called her ruthless and then blessed her for saving them from their own appetites. She had a different envelope in her hand this time, thicker, heavier, a kind of offering you couldn't mistake. "I can't keep doing this," she said without preface. "I can't keep orbiting a life like a moon and pretending I'm not carving out a tide." Daniel put down his wrench. "Then stop," he said. "Pick a path." She held up the envelope. "I choose both paths," she said, and her voice was quiet and wild at once. "Come with me, Denver first. New York when we want. A job that fits the man you are, not just the hands you have. A school for Emily, that will blow open her world. A home with space for everything. And me." Her voice went hoarse. "I'm offering me, Daniel." He stared at the envelope. It was not money, though it was also money. It was keys, passes, paper that paved roads. His heart did the thing where it didn't trust itself, and then trusted too much. "Olivia," he said, and the word held more than her name. "I believe you. I believe all of it. And if this were only about me, I might say yes so fast I'd get windburn." "But," she said, eyes too bright. "But Emily is 8, he said. Her world is measured in small days. In the teacher who knows she hates the clarinet but loves glue sticks. In the crack in the sidewalk, 3 houses down that looks like a dragon if you squint. In a bedtime that doesn't have a time zone." He swallowed. "The life you're offering is the size of a planet. The one she needs right now is the size of this street." "I can make a planet feel like a street," she said fiercely. "I know," he said. "I've seen you bend galaxies. It's not about whether you can, it's about whether you should, and whether I should let you." She looked away at the lift, at the dent in the door from a teenage mistake, at the poster of a classic car Emily had taped crooked. When she looked back, something like acceptance had joined the fight in her face. "You're walking away." "I'm walking toward her," he said, "and toward the version of me who doesn't confuse grand with good." Silence, and the sound of a drip from the roof landing precisely where it always did. Outside, a truck passed and its rumble stitched them back into the town's fabric. "Will I see you again?" she asked, very small. He came close enough to see the flecks of gray in the green of her eyes. "Yes," he said. "But not because of a contract. Because of choice." She nodded. She put the envelope back into her coat with hands that barely shook. "Then I'll be in Denver sometimes," she said. "And occasionally in a small town that swears it's invisible. You'll leave footprints," he said, and she almost smiled. He walked her to the door. The suits were gone, she'd come alone. The sky was soft, spring learning to trust itself. She turned once, looked at him as if committing him to a memory that did not need assistance, and then she left. Emily arrived a minute later, hair bow askew, cheeks flushed with a race she had invented and won. "Who was that?" she asked. "A friend," Daniel said. "Does she wear high heels to the grocery store?" Emily asked, revisiting the original question with new gravity. "Sometimes," he said, "but sometimes she wears boots." Emily seemed satisfied. She went to the corner where the chalk lived and began to draw a dragon who was also a cloud. Daniel stood there for a long time. He felt both loss and clarity, braided so tightly they held each other up. In summer, the mountains remember laughter differently. The lake unpuckers. The sky turns generous. Daniel and Emily sat on the tailgate one evening and split a sandwich that pretended to be 2. He checked his phone once out of habit and found a message from an unknown number. It was a photo, a corner of a conference room, a cup of coffee, a pair of boots, and a note written on a napkin in a hand he knew now by the angle of its insistence. The note read, "Building something. Leaving space for small days. You taught me that." "Oh." He stared at it. He smiled. He put the phone away and did not look at it again for a very long time. "Daddy," Emily said, mouth full of bread and summer. "Do you think dragons can be clouds, or are they just pretending?" "I think," he said, and looked at the sky, "that some things are both, and that's okay." She leaned her head on his shoulder. The sun lowered itself with ceremony. The world, vast and intricate, kept its old promises and made new ones. Somewhere far away, a woman who had learned the cost of everything and the value of the few things that matter was choosing, moment by moment, to hold still when her power wanted to run. Daniel chose too. He chose the street. He chose the laugh. He chose, again and again, the small days that stitched themselves into a life so sturdy even miracles felt like part of the plan. And when winter came back, as it always did, he did what he always did. He ran toward the fire. He saved what could be saved. He walked away from everything else.